Picture this. After 15 years of bankrolling your entire family's lifestyle, your daughter-in-law stands up at your 69th birthday dinner and announces to everyone that you'll never be a real mother. What would you do? Well, I'll tell you exactly what I did and why they're now begging for forgiveness. The wine glass trembled slightly in Brittany's manicured fingers as she rose from her chair that evening. My daughter-in-law wore that practiced smile I'd grown to recognize over the years, the one that appeared whenever she needed something from me. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something sinister lurked behind those perfectly applied lips. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice cutting through the dinner conversation like a blade. The guests fell silent, turning their attention to her. My son Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. "To my dear mother-in-law, Elena Martinez, who so generously keeps this family afloat financially." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the final blow. "Though money can't buy everything like being a real mother to us." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as though I'd been slapped across the face in front of a room full of strangers. These weren't even my friends, they were Brittany's acquaintances, people who barely knew me but were now witnessing my public humiliation. My hands remained folded in my lap, my expression unchanged, though inside I felt something fundamental shift. 15 years. 15 long years I had poured my resources into this family, believing I was investing in love, in relationships, in building something meaningful. Instead, I had apparently purchased nothing but contempt disguised as gratitude. Without a word, I reached into my purse and withdrew a small envelope I'd prepared that morning, though at the time, I hadn't been certain I'd have the courage to use it. I placed it gently beside Brittany's wine glass, the paper making a soft whisper against the tablecloth. Then I stood, smoothed my navy dress, and walked toward the door. "Mom, wait," Michael's voice cracked behind me, but I didn't turn around. Each step toward the exit felt like shedding invisible chains I'd worn for so long I'd forgotten they were there. The envelope contained a single key, the key to the house they called home for over a decade. The house I'd purchased, the house that remained in my name. Attached was a note with just 12 words. 30 days to vacate. Legal documents will arrive tomorrow morning. My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm about to tell you how I reclaimed my life from people who saw me only as a walking ATM. But first, let me take you back to where it all began. 22 years ago, I was a 47-year-old widow trying to rebuild my world after losing my husband Carlos in a construction accident. Carlos had left me with a successful engineering firm and enough life insurance to ensure I'd never face financial hardship. What he couldn't leave me was protection from my own generous heart. Michael was just 23 when he married Brittany, a charming 21-year-old with strawberry blonde hair, and the kind of sweet smile that could convince you to empty your bank account. And that's essentially what happened, though it took 15 years for me to realize it. It started innocently enough. Young couples need help getting established, right? I covered the down payment on their first home, a modest 3-bedroom with a backyard where I imagined future grandchildren would play. Then came the car payment because their used vehicle wasn't reliable enough for a growing family. Next, a European honeymoon because they deserved to celebrate properly after a simple wedding. Brittany had a gift for making financial requests sound like urgent necessities rather than wants. She'd call me with a trembling voice, explaining how embarrassed she felt asking but how desperate their situation had become. Michael's startup business needed more time to generate profit. The baby needed specialized formula. The car required unexpected repairs. There was always something. Month after month, I found myself transferring $2,800 to cover their basic expenses. Mortgage, utilities, car insurance, phone bills, gym memberships. I paid for everything. When their children were born, first Sophie and then little James, I covered hospital bills, nanny services, private school tuition, and every imaginable activity fee. I calculated recently that I've spent over $485,000 supporting their lifestyle in 15 years. Not once did I receive genuine gratitude, only expectations, demands dressed up as emergencies, and increasingly subtle signs of disrespect. The warning signs had been there all along, but I'd chosen to interpret them as stress rather than ingratitude. Brittany's eye rolls when I'd arrive for dinner. Her theatrical sighs when discussing household expenses. Her habit of making cutting remarks about people who have too much money and no real problems to worry about. Michael had stopped working 3 years earlier, convinced by Brittany that he needed to focus entirely on his revolutionary business concept. I never saw concrete results from this venture, only a 36-year-old man sleeping until noon and playing video games while his wife organized shopping trips with my money. The birthday dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became my awakening. Brittany had invited people I'd never met, friends from her social circle who looked at me with that particular mixture of pity and judgment reserved for the elderly relative everyone tolerates for financial reasons. Throughout the evening, she'd made pointed comments about older people who cling too desperately to their children's lives, and the importance of healthy boundaries between generations. When they brought out the cake, it wasn't even a flavor I like, chocolate, which I've always detested but which Brittany adores. Her toast was the final straw. The moment when the careful facade finally cracked and revealed the truth underneath. To her, I had never been a maternal figure. I was the convenient benefactor who could be publicly humiliated because what was I going to do, stop paying their bills? That night, as I sat in my downtown apartment overlooking the city lights, everything became crystal clear. I wasn't part of their family, I was their financial resource. They didn't love me, they loved my bank account. They didn't respect me, they tolerated me because I was useful. But here's what they didn't understand. I was Elena Martinez, a woman who had built a multimillion-dollar business from scratch after losing her husband. I had forgotten my own strength while trying to buy their love, but that night I remembered exactly who I was. The next morning at 6 a.m., I was dressed in my charcoal business suit, the one that always made me feel powerful during contract negotiations. I pulled my silver hair into an elegant chignon and looked in the mirror at the woman I'd been before I became everyone's personal ATM. My first call was to the bank. Good morning, this is Elena Martinez. I need to cancel all automatic transfers from my primary account immediately. The representative asked me to confirm each transaction. Monthly household support, $2,800. Canceled. Brittany's luxury SUV payment, $950. Canceled. Private school tuition, $1,200. Canceled. Country club membership, $400. Canceled. Mrs. Martinez, are you certain about these cancellations? The banker asked with obvious concern. Completely certain, I replied without hesitation. I also need to cancel all supplementary credit cards issued under my account for Michael Patterson and Brittany Patterson. Next, I called my attorney, David Chan, who had handled my legal affairs for over 15 years. David, I need eviction papers prepared for the Oakwood Drive property, and I want to review any financial obligations they may have incurred using my name as a reference. Elena, this is a significant step, David cautioned. Are you sure about this course of action? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The phone started ringing around 10:30 a.m. First Michael, then Brittany, call after call going straight to voicemail. I let it ring 23 times before finally answering. Mom, what's happening? Michael's voice was frantic. Brittany went to buy groceries and her card was declined. When we called the bank, they said all our accounts have been frozen. Good morning, Michael, I replied with a calmness that contrasted sharply with his panic. I trust you slept well in my house. Your house? Mom, this is our house. We've lived here for 12 years. A house I purchased that remains in my name, and for which you've never paid a single dollar, I replied evenly. The eviction documents will arrive by courier this afternoon. You have 30 days to find alternative housing. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could hear Michael's labored breathing on the other end. Mom, please, we need to talk. I know Brittany went too far last night, but that doesn't mean you should do this. Went too far? I repeated with a bitter laugh. Michael, your wife humiliated me in front of strangers after I've supported your family for 15 years. But that's not what hurts most. What hurts is that you sat there and allowed it to happen. Not once in all these years have you defended me from her increasingly cruel comments. She didn't mean what she said. She meant exactly what she said, Michael. And you know it. For years, I've been treated like the pathetic relative who needs to buy affection because she's lonely. But last night I realized something important. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who despise me. I ended the call before he could respond. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I had lunch alone at my favorite restaurant, a cozy bistro downtown where they served the most incredible mushroom risotto. I brought a novel I'd been meaning to read for months and enjoyed a peaceful meal without listening to complaints about money, without feigning interest in Brittany's manufactured dramas, without pretending her children respected me when they'd clearly learned to see me as nothing more than a source of funding. The waiter, Marcus, who'd served me for years, approached with curiosity. "Mrs. Martinez, I haven't seen you here in quite a while. How have you been?" "I'm rediscovering myself," I replied with a genuine smile. "And it's remarkably liberating." As I ate, I thought about all the plans I'd canceled to accommodate Michael and Brittany's schedules. The art gallery opening I'd missed because they needed me to babysit. The Mediterranean cruise I'd canceled when Brittany claimed James needed emergency dental work that insurance wouldn't cover, though I later learned it was a routine cleaning completely covered by their dental plan. Or last year, when I'd finally decided to renovate my apartment. I'd hired an interior designer, selected new furniture, planned to create the elegant sanctuary I'd always envisioned. But then Michael appeared with an incredible investment opportunity, requiring $40,000 immediately. Of course, I wrote the check. The investment turned out to be a cryptocurrency scheme that evaporated within 3 months. My furniture remained unchanged. My phone buzzed with a text from Brittany. "Elena, please, can we discuss this rationally? The children don't understand why grandmother is upset. This is affecting them emotionally." Typical manipulation, using Sophie and James as emotional shields, when this was really about her parasitic lifestyle. I replied, "The children are welcome to visit me anytime. You and Michael have 30 days. Non-negotiable." Her response came immediately. "You're a bitter and vindictive woman. Michael was right about you all along." I read the message and laughed out loud, drawing curious glances from other diners. There was something profoundly liberating about them finally showing their true colors without pretense. That evening, when I returned to my building, Michael was waiting in the lobby. He sat hunched in one of the leather chairs with his head in his hands like a scolded child. When he saw me, he jumped up immediately. For the first time in years, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Mom, please," he began as I walked toward the elevators. "We need to talk. This is getting out of control." "You're right," I replied without stopping. "It got out of control years ago when you repeatedly allowed your wife to disrespect me, while I financed your lifestyle." He followed me to the elevator. "I can explain everything. Brittany's been under stress. The kids have been difficult. Last night she showed me exactly what she thinks of me," I interrupted as I pressed the button for my floor. "And the most heartbreaking part, Michael, is that you stood by silently while your wife humiliated your mother." The elevator doors opened and he followed me down the hallway to my apartment. "Mom, please let me in. We can work this out as a family." I stopped with my key in the lock and turned to face him. It was strange seeing my 36-year-old son pleading like a child. For all these years, I'd been so focused on supporting him financially that I'd forgotten to teach him to be a responsible man. "Family." I repeated the word as if hearing it for the first time. "Michael, when was the last time you visited me without needing money? When did you last call just to ask how I was? When did you ever defend me against Brittany's venomous remarks?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. I could see him desperately searching his memory for a single example, but finding none. "Exactly," I continued. "You can't remember because it never happened. To you, I'm not family, I'm an ATM with feelings. And last night, Brittany made it clear you don't even respect those feelings." I opened my door and turned to him one final time. "The legal papers will arrive this afternoon. Read them carefully. You have exactly 30 days to find somewhere else to live. After that, I'll involve the police if necessary." "And if we refuse to leave?" he asked with a mixture of defiance and desperation. Then you'll discover what it truly means to have a mother who won't tolerate disrespect, I replied before closing the door. That night, I enjoyed the most peaceful dinner I'd had in years. Grilled salmon with asparagus, a glass of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, classical music in the background. No complaints about the food, no mediating childish arguments, no pretending interest in social drama. Just me, my meal, my music, and my peace. The next morning brought interesting news from David. Michael came to my office yesterday. He wants to negotiate the eviction terms. Really? What's his proposal? He's willing to get a job if you'll give them 6 more months in the house and reinstate the credit cards temporarily. I burst out laughing. David, do you realize what just happened? My 36-year-old son is negotiating employment as if he's doing me a favor. I noticed the irony. What should I tell him? Tell him the offer has merit, but he needs to prove his sincerity before I consider any extensions. He must have secured employment and received his first paycheck before the 30-day deadline. If he can show me a real job and actual earnings by day 29, I'll consider extending the deadline by 30 additional days. But the credit cards remain canceled indefinitely. I also received disturbing news. David had discovered 3 department store credit cards I never knew existed, opened by Brittany using my financial information as backing. The debt totaled nearly $75,000. Is this legal? I asked. Technically, it's fraud, but given the family relationship and your history of paying their expenses, prosecution would be challenging. However, we can dispute the debts and cancel the cards immediately. Do it. And David, investigate thoroughly. If they've been using my credit fraudulently, I need to know everything. That afternoon, I called my old friend Margaret Sullivan, a college roommate I'd lost touch with during my years of intensive family financing. Elena, she exclaimed with surprise. My goodness, it's been 10 years? I told her the entire story, including the credit fraud discovery. Margaret listened silently for nearly an hour. Elena, she said when I finished, do you realize what you've described isn't a dysfunctional family situation, it's systematic financial abuse. Financial abuse? When someone manipulates you emotionally to access your resources, uses your generosity as a control mechanism, commits fraud with your identity, that's not family love, it's abuse. Her words gave me a framework for understanding what I'd endured. For 15 years, I hadn't been the generous matriarch of a loving family. I'd been a victim of deliberate financial exploitation. You know what's most insidious about financial abuse? Margaret continued. The victim always feels guilty for protecting themselves. They convince you that setting boundaries makes you selfish, that protecting your resources makes you cruel. That's exactly how I felt all week. Elena, listen carefully. Supporting your adult son for a year while he finds work is generosity. Supporting him for 5 years while he gets established is enabling. Supporting him for 15 years while he lives luxuriously without working is being abused. 3 days later, Sophie and James arrived for our scheduled visit, accompanied by Michael, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and he wore that defeated expression I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Mom, I need to speak with you too, he began, but I stopped him with a raised hand. Michael, this conversation is with Sophie and James. You can wait in the lobby downstairs. Sophie, now 13, looked at me with those intelligent brown eyes so like her grandfather's, full of confusion and worry. James, 10, seemed more interested in the cookies I'd prepared, but I could tell from his posture he was nervous too. Once Michael left, I served hot chocolate and homemade cookies, and we settled in my living room. Grandmother, is it true you're taking our house away? Sophie asked directly. Mom's been crying constantly and Dad hasn't left his room. I chose my words carefully. These children deserved honesty presented in an age-appropriate way. Sophie, James, do you know where the money comes from that pays for your house, school, vacations, and clothes? James shrugged. From Mom and Dad, I guess. No, sweetheart. For 15 years, that money has come from me. The house belongs to me. All the bills are paid with my money. Even the food you eat daily is purchased with money I provide. Sophie's eyes widened. Really? Dad doesn't work. Your father says he has a business, but that business has never earned enough to support your family. Your mother doesn't work either. But then why do they always tell us there's no money for things we want? James asked with genuine confusion. Because it's easier to say there's no money than to explain that the money isn't theirs, it's mine. Sophie, always the more intuitive child, began connecting the dots. That's why whenever we want something expensive, Mom says ask grandmother, or see if grandmother can help us. Exactly. But that changed when your mother chose to humiliate me publicly after years of supporting your family. I explained in age-appropriate terms what had happened at the birthday dinner. I told them about Brittany's cruel toast and my decision to finally establish boundaries. So we have to move? James asked in a small voice. Your parents need to learn to support themselves and you. But that doesn't mean you'll disappear from my life. You're my grandchildren, and I love you more than anything. However, I'm no longer going to finance the luxurious lifestyle your parents have grown accustomed to. Sophie nodded slowly. I think I understand. Mom says mean things about you sometimes, and I always feel uncomfortable but never knew why. What kind of things does she say? That you're controlling, that you use money to manipulate us, that you like us depending on you because you don't have your own life. Hearing those words from my granddaughter was painful but also validating. I finally had confirmation of what I'd suspected. Sophie, James, I said carefully, I want you to understand something crucial. What I'm doing isn't meant to hurt you. It's to teach you something your parents never have, that respect is non-negotiable and true love cannot be purchased. But where will we live? James asked. All my friends are at my school. Your parents will need to find jobs and look for housing they can afford with their own earnings. You might need to transfer to public schools and live without expensive luxuries, but millions of children attend public schools and are happy. What's harmful is growing up thinking money appears magically without understanding that someone works hard to earn it. Sophie reflected thoughtfully. I guess I never considered that. Whenever I want something, I just ask Mom. And if she says no money, we ask you. And how do you think that makes me feel? James frowned. Like a bank machine. My 10-year-old grandson's brutal honesty surprised me. Exactly like a bank machine, James. That must be awful. Sophie murmured. I hate when friends only seek me out when they need lunch money. Now imagine that happening for 15 years with your own family. After the children left, I felt a mixture of sadness and hope. Sad they had to learn difficult truths so young, but hopeful that someone in that family was finally beginning to understand the value of work and respect. 2 weeks later, David called with an update. Michael secured employment at Rodriguez Construction. He started as a general laborer, but his supervisor says he has potential for advancement if he maintains his work ethic. I'm pleased to hear that. There's more. Brittany found part-time work at a translation service. Apparently she's fluent in Spanish and French. They've also moved into a 2-bedroom apartment they can afford with their combined income. And the children? Adjusting well to their new public school. Sophie made the honor roll and joined student government. James made the soccer team. 3 months after that fateful birthday dinner, I found myself sitting at a sidewalk cafe in Barcelona, watching the Mediterranean sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. In front of me was a perfect courte-à-deux and a poetry book I'd wanted to read for years. For the first time in decades, my time belonged entirely to me. The European trip had been spontaneous. After selling my engineering firm and realizing I had more money than I could spend in 2 lifetimes, I decided to gift myself the freedom I'd been denied for so long. My phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. Grandmother, I got a part-time job at the neighborhood bookstore. I've saved $180 this month. James is helping Mr. Garcia with yard work. Dad got promoted to crew leader, and Mom was made senior translator. It's strange, but I think we're happier now than when everything was given to us. Her message filled me with deep satisfaction. I had made the right choice, even though it was the most difficult decision of my life. Michael had called me the previous week, his voice noticeably different, more mature, less entitled. Mom, I want to apologize not for what's happening now, but for all the previous years. You were right. I'm a grown man who never learned responsibility because I always knew you'd solve everything. How do you feel now that you must solve problems yourself? Terrified, he admitted with nervous laughter. But also proud, I think. When I got my first paycheck, I understood something I'd never felt before: that money was truly mine. I'd earned it through my own effort. And Brittany, she's struggling more than me. She's still angry with you, still thinks you were too harsh. But she's working, and the children respect her more now that they see her making genuine effort. I'm glad the whole family is learning to work. Mom, can I ask something? Will you ever completely forgive us? Is there any chance we can be a normal family again? I had reflected carefully before answering. Michael, forgiveness isn't granted once and forever. It's built daily through consistent actions and genuine respect. If you continue demonstrating you've learned these lessons, if you treat me with deserved respect, if you remain responsible for your own lives, then yes, we can rebuild our relationship. But it will be different from before. You'll never help us financially again? I'll help in different ways. If the grandchildren need something for their education, if there's a genuine medical emergency, if you demonstrate you've been saving and working toward a specific goal, I'll consider contributing. But I will never again support capable adults who choose not to support themselves. Now, sitting in that Spanish cafe, I remembered that conversation with a smile. 90 days had passed since I cut all funding, and my family had not only survived but was thriving in ways never possible while living off my money. David had sent a progress report the previous week. Michael had received 2 promotions in 2 months due to his work ethic. Brittany had been promoted to department coordinator. The children were excelling in their new school. Sophie had been elected class president and James had joined the debate team. Most importantly, they'd learned to live within a budget. They'd sold Brittany's luxury vehicle and bought a reliable used car. They downsized to a cozy apartment paid for with their own earnings. They discovered that cooking at home was not only economical but enjoyable, and that the best family experiences didn't require money: park walks, game nights, homemade meals prepared together. It's strange, Sophie had told me during one of our weekly calls, but I understand better now what it means to be a family. Before, when we had everything we wanted, we never appreciated anything. Now when we buy something special like pizza on Friday night, it feels like a real celebration. That transformation confirmed I'd made the right decision. My grandchildren were learning values that would serve them throughout their lives: the value of work, the satisfaction of personal achievement, the importance of gratitude, and the difference between wants and needs. As for me, these 3 months had been revelatory in unexpected ways. I'd rediscovered who I was when not defined by my financial utility to others. I'd reconnected with old friends, pursued abandoned hobbies, and traveled to places I'd dreamed of visiting. Most importantly, I'd reclaimed my dignity. That evening in Barcelona, as the sun set over the sea, I called Margaret. "How's your European adventure?" she asked with obvious joy. "Transformative. But Margaret, I think I'm ready to return home." "Tired of beautiful Spain?" "Quite the opposite. I feel so good about myself that I no longer need to escape my old life. I'm ready to build a new life at home, one where I'm the protagonist, not just the financier of others' lives." "And your family?" "They're thriving. And when I return, I'll have a different relationship with them, one based on mutual respect and genuine love, not economic dependence." That night, in my hotel overlooking the Gothic Quarter, I wrote in my journal for the first time in decades. Today I celebrated turning 70 in one of the world's most beautiful cities. But the most beautiful thing isn't the architecture I've admired or the breathtaking vistas. The most beautiful thing is the feeling of having reclaimed my life. For 15 years, I became a shadow of who I'd been, existing solely to be useful to people who didn't value me. I thought I was being a good mother and grandmother, but I was actually being a terrible life teacher. Now my grandchildren call to share work achievements, not to request money. My son speaks to me with respect because he's learned respect must be earned. My daughter-in-law is beginning to understand that true motherhood isn't about getting others to pay for your children, but about teaching them to be responsible people. For the first time in decades, I am free. What I found wasn't revenge, it was liberation. What I practiced wasn't cruelty, it was tough love. The kind that sometimes requires saying no to teach important lessons. Tomorrow I return home, but not as the same woman who left 3 months ago. I return as Elena Martinez, successful businesswoman, independent woman, loving but firm grandmother, and above all, a person who no longer needs to purchase anyone's love because I've learned the most important lesson of all. Love you have to buy isn't worth what it costs. I closed my journal and looked out the hotel window one last time. Tomorrow would begin my journey home, but I was no longer the same woman who had fled a humiliating dinner 3 months earlier. I had found something more valuable than all the money I'd spent in 15 years of misguided generosity. I had found my dignity, and this time no one would take it from me. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means everything. So please consider subscribing for more inspiring stories about reclaiming your power and self-respect.